As always, I like to show you slices of the videos that I watch that I realize you really need to see, things that stand out. And a lot of this video are slices that you have to see from a recent Danielle Camboni interview. And she's interviewing the gentleman from Macro Compass. And there's excellent things he says. Sometimes it's because he agrees with me and I've been telling you these things for a while. So it's good for me to show you like this guy's saying. That's what I'm talking about. Other times, maybe I disagree and I want to see what his comments are on that. And that's important too. You got to look at both sides. But here are the slices you need to see from the Danielle Camboni interview. And keep in mind that nothing in this video anywhere is intended as personalized trading advice for you. Let's go.
So the de-dollarization is going to happen and it's going to be a very painful process. What I always debate is this idea that we can have an orderly transition from today's dollar-centric system to something else.
They're talking a lot about the de-dollarization trend that's going on around the world right now. And it's actually for that video I'm making about that I came across this interview. And that's when I started saying, this is going to be a video for you guys to see. There's things that are going to really knock your socks off. So they're talking about going back to a gold standard maybe. And how painful it's going to be with all this de-dollarization that we're seeing just ahead of us now. That we're experiencing now, but it's going to get worse.
80% of global FX transactions are denominated in dollars today. Most of commodities trades are denominated in dollars and so on and so forth. What we have also done is we have created $12 trillion of debt.
As if the de-dollarization wasn't bad enough, they've got then on top of that all this debt, and then they raise interest rates. How do you think this is going to end?
And it's otherwise a very painful process that would take away the dollar from its dollar dominance. It will happen, but it will happen through a pretty painful process.
But I want to keep this next part in here because it's got Kevin O'Leary in it, so we got to put that on camera. And if you want to get our world famous stock picks, just join the peterleeds.com newsletter.
How far out are we from that reality? And I bring up a recent interview I had with Kevin O'Leary, who thinks otherwise. He says he keeps hearing about de-dollarization since 1966. For him, it's just not going to happen because he says, if you look at who's dumping dollars, Brazil, Venezuela, Russia, he says, who cares? There are countries that don't count.
Well, the thing is, you always start from countries that don't count, and then you sum up to a bunch of countries that don't count, but put them up together, they all count when you consider them as a sum, right?
And I wanted to mention that Danielle Camboni's channel is very bullish on gold. They promote gold a lot. They talk about gold a lot, gold mining companies. Nothing wrong with that because they're correct. But I just wanted to point that out there that a lot of what they're trying to say is consistently talking about higher gold prices. We're going to get into that. But we start off when it goes into a little bit of how the dollar has actually lost a lot of its global usage. That's what this next part is.
The dollar has slowly but surely lost a bit of its dominance over the last 20 years, Daniela. So we have gone from 70-80% of dollar dominance overall to maybe 60-65%. This might seem insignificant, but I think it's a trend building up. Now, the question is, what replaces the dollar system? That's the real question, right? Because we can keep screaming about de-dollarization, but what is the new system? Well, let me give you a hint. It's not a system based on a bunch of currencies that go together and are commodity-backed on all these fancy things. I think the most likely alternative is a gold-based system once again. Okay, let me ask you something. During this de-dollarization process we have seen slowly but surely building over the last few years and few decades, do you know what is the asset that central banks around the world and governments are still accumulating and buying at a pretty rapid pace? It's gold. It is gold. And why? Gold already sits in the system. It already sits on the balance sheet of governments, central banks, exactly these so-called small countries that might want to hope to get away from the dollar. On top of it, gold has already served this very role of being the anchor, the real asset that everybody trusts to be basically the pin around the global monetary system. It has already done so, and quite successfully.
I don't know whether or not we're ever going to go back to a gold-based system. I hope we do. It'll be better for every economy. But in this next part here, he goes on to talk about a lot of the downside that we're going to be seeing as we continue the de-dollarization globally.
Obviously, again, this transition, Daniela, will not be a smooth one. I mean, if you're moving away from dollar dominance to a system based on gold, you're basically deleveraging the system as we know it. When you do a gold-based system, that is not anymore at the epicenter of the system, because if you do that, you're basically increasing leverage, you're creating fiat dollars. But if gold is there to serve as an anchor, at some point you can't do that anymore because you can always convert your dollars at a fixed price to gold. If there are too many dollars, if there is too much debt, the system doesn't work anymore.
When there's too many dollars and too much debt, the system doesn't work anymore. Very important to understand that. The entire system is breaking down at this point. Well, I've got you here. I'll tell you to your face, please subscribe to the channel. We need all the help we can get. We're trying to get this channel to have a lot more of a footprint.
In the past, every time we have reached that level, the economy couldn't take it anymore, Daniela. Basically, real interest rates were positive, borrowing costs were higher, conditions were tighter, and at some point the economy can't take it anymore. And yes, you manage to slow down inflation, but because you're basically driving the economy in a recession. That's how you get there.
That was like a lot of what I've been talking about. Federal Reserve increasing interest rates to put strain on the economy, slow things down, increase unemployment. One of the results historically will always be a recession. So that's what he's talking about. But then in this next part of the video, I want you to see he's talking about how the Federal Reserve and the powers that be and the authorities come out there and they give incorrect assessments of the economy, of future recessions. They're on the fence of thinking about whether or not are we going to have a recession, is going to be a soft landing. They're at that point in the past when we were then followed by the global financial crisis. It'll be no different this time. They're going to talk about maybe it's a soft landing, but then you get the real serious recession or depression I've been talking about for a couple of years now.
It tells you that the Fed is not the entity to follow when it comes to forecasting where are we in the macro cycle, right? That's because any policymaker does not want to volunteer to be the one that caused a recession. So they're never going to call for one, Daniela.
Right.
They're never going to call for one.
This next part's very important. I want you to see because very few people see inflation going the way that I'm telling you it's going to go. But this part, he agrees with what I've been saying, and you're going to see it's potentially going to go even lower than you probably imagine.
People are telling me, Alf, inflation will never go back to 2%. Well, I can tell you inflation will go even below that if we go in a recession. And there is data that speaks about that. Over the last 100 years, any recession in the US managed to bring down inflation by 7 percentage points, Daniela, 7 percentage points. We start as we speak with inflation around 5-6% as we speak today. If we enter a recession today, the average recession historically would basically bring inflation to 0% or even will bring us through a short period of disinflation, of deflation even. That's what history says. Trust me, on the cycle, if you get a recession, inflation will not only slow to 2%, but even below that.
Now he's talking about the big Fed pivot where they start lowering interest rates instead of increasing them anymore. First, we're going to have another quarter point rate hike in May, and then that's going to be as high as they go. Federal Reserve will start bringing rates down. After that, when we start seeing the pain point, this is what I'm telling you about, and this is all going to be built into my inflationary bounce video that's going to be coming out relatively soon.
The massive pivot from 5% to 1% in 12 to 15 months. The S&P 500 in 2001, despite this massive Fed pivot, lost 12% again. Gold held its ground, the dollar held its ground, but equities actually lost another 12% despite a massive Fed pivot. So what I want to say to investors with this is, don't play a hero. This is not the time of the cycle where to be very aggressive. It's the time of the cycle where to think about defensive assets, bonds, gold. That's what you want to look at this point of the cycle.
I'm so glad you guys are here. You guys are important to us. We want to do our best for you. We want to help you understand what to do in this absolutely crumbling economy, how to best protect yourself and the people that you care about.